The sun was already low when Mary stepped off the old bus. She hadn't been back in over 20 years, and yet nothing had really changed. Same dusty roads, same peeling church sign, same silence that followed her like a shadow. She pulled her coat tighter, not because of the cold, but because of the memories. They kicked her out when she was just 13, pregnant, alone, ashamed. No one asked her how it happened. No one asked if she was okay. Not even her father. "Leave this house," he said. "You brought shame on this family, Mary. You're no longer my daughter." That night, she slept behind a diner, belly growing, heart broken. Now, after all these years, she was back, and she wasn't alone. From the corner of the main street, a young man stepped out of a truck, tall, strong, quiet eyes. He nodded at her. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked. Mary didn't answer right away. She just looked toward the church at the end of the street. That's where it all began, where the town whispered, where the pain took root. "I have to," she said. "God brought me back for a reason." Inside the old town grocery store, an older woman looked through the window. She blinked twice, heart racing. "Is that Mary?" she whispered. In less than an hour, everyone knew. The girl who left in disgrace had returned. And she wasn't just back. She was standing taller, walking slower, and holding a quiet power that made people nervous. At the bank, where Mary's father once worked as a branch manager, two older men sat near the window. "That girl, she was trouble back then," one muttered. "But look at her now," the other said, eyes narrowing. "She's not here for a visit. She's here for something." What they didn't know was, Mary wasn't just back to visit. She had come to reveal a truth, one that would shake the whole town, especially her family. The young man with her, his name was Elijah, and he carried a letter in his jacket pocket. A letter written by someone they all believed had died. As Mary approached her childhood home, she saw it. Same faded blue paint, same porch swing, and on the porch, her mother. Older, smaller, eyes that held both fear and longing. They stared at each other, frozen in time. Then Mary spoke softly. "Hi, Mom." Tears filled the woman's eyes. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "I'm not here to cause pain," Mary continued, "but I can't keep living in silence either." Behind the door, footsteps, heavy, familiar. Her father appeared. Gray hair, firm jaw, Bible in hand. He looked at her, and his lips pressed into a line. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. Mary didn't flinch. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said. "But now it's time you hear the truth." Elijah stepped forward. "She's not alone," he said calmly. "I'm her son, and I came to speak with you too." Silence. Only the sound of the wind moving through the trees. Her father's hand trembled slightly over the edge of the Bible. Then Mary said something that made the whole atmosphere shift. "You once told me God turned his face away from me, but he didn't. He stayed with me when you didn't." Tears rolled down her mother's cheeks. "I prayed for this day," her mother whispered, "every single night." Mary stepped forward, slowly. "I didn't come back for revenge," she said. "I came to bring something home, the truth." And in her hands, she held an envelope, one that would change everything. Mary didn't sleep much that night. She lay in a small room above the old bakery, where Miss Ruth, her childhood neighbor, had offered her a place to stay. Miss Ruth had never judged her. Not then. Not now. "You look just like your mother when she was young," Ruth said, bringing in a warm blanket. "But your eyes are stronger now." Mary smiled faintly. "I had to grow up fast." The town hadn't grown much since she left. Same rusted swings in the park, same post office, same coffee shop where everyone knew everyone's business. But now, there were new faces, new stories. She watched people from the window as they passed. Some stared. Some avoided her. Some whispered her name like a curse. Others like a prayer. The past still lived in the cracks of this place. She could feel it everywhere. Elijah, meanwhile, was restless. He walked the streets, looking for answers his mother couldn't give him. "Why didn't they protect you?" he asked her one evening. Mary looked at him, voice soft. "Because fear speaks louder than love when pride gets in the way." They visited the old church the next day, the one where her father once preached fire and brimstone. Inside, it smelled of dust and memories. An elderly man approached them, Samuel, the church caretaker. "Mary," he said slowly, "I prayed for you every week." She felt a lump rise in her throat. "I never blamed the church, Mr. Samuel. I blamed silence." He lowered his head. "Your father, he changed after you left, closed himself off. But people, they whisper things they don't understand. They think shame is contagious." Mary looked at the old cross hanging above the altar. "I was a child," she said, "but I was treated like a curse." Elijah stepped beside her. "You were a blessing, even when they couldn't see it." Back in town, a man named Daniel sat in the back of the coffee shop, watching them. He was in his late 40s, a former banker who once dated Mary's older sister. He'd gone through a divorce, lost a fortune in bad investments, and now ran a small loan office. When he saw Mary, he felt something stir. Guilt. Maybe more. She never should have been treated like that, he muttered to himself. Later that day, he found her by the edge of town. "You probably don't remember me," he said. Mary looked up. "Daniel, you used to bring your guitar to youth group." He smiled, surprised she remembered. "I'm sorry, Mary, for everything, for not speaking up, for watching it happen." Mary nodded. "Words matter, Daniel, but silence can destroy more than words ever could." They spoke for an hour. He told her about losing his home, about how the banks took everything. "I thought I had wealth," he said bitterly, "but I didn't even have peace." Mary looked at him. True wealth doesn't sit in your account. It lives in your heart. That night, Mary pulled out the envelope again. The one Elijah carried, the one that held the letter. She read it over and over, and every time her hands trembled. It was written by someone they all thought had died. Someone from her past, someone who knew the truth. She looked at Elijah. "Are you ready?" she asked. He nodded. "We're not here to break them, Mom. We're here to set the truth free." The next morning, the town woke up to something it hadn't seen in years. Mary standing in front of the church steps, holding a microphone. Someone had called the local radio station, someone who wanted her silenced. But they arrived just in time to hear her speak. She stood tall, calm, but her voice carried weight. "I came back," she said, "not to stir the past, but to shine light on it." People gathered, curious, skeptical, some angry. Her father watched from the church door, arms crossed. "You all know who I was," Mary continued. "You know what I did, but you never asked what was done to me." A murmur rose through the crowd. Elijah stood behind her. Then he stepped forward and took the microphone. "My name is Elijah," he said. "I'm the child this town didn't want to see, the one judged before he was born." He pulled the letter from his jacket. "This is a letter from Joseph, the boy who was blamed for everything, the boy who disappeared." Gasps. Mary took the letter gently and began reading. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, but I need the truth to come out." Joseph had been 15, Mary was 13. They were children, but his family moved away overnight, and the rumors only got worse. What no one knew was that Joseph had left the letter with a friend, Daniel, and Daniel had kept it all these years, buried under guilt. He now stepped forward, hands shaking. "I was a coward," he said. "I should have spoken then. But I'm speaking now." Mary's father stepped out of the church, voice raised. "This is not the time nor the place." But Mary turned to him. "No, it's exactly the time and exactly the place." She walked toward him, holding the Bible he once gave her on her 10th birthday. "You taught me these words," she said, opening to Romans 8:28. "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, even in pain, even in silence, even in the shadows of shame." Her father's face turned pale. "You disgraced this house," he said, his voice cracking. "No," she replied. "You disgraced love when you let pride speak louder than grace." People were now crying. Some bowed their heads. Others simply stared. Suddenly, from the back of the crowd, a woman stepped forward. She was in her 60s, well-dressed. Her name was Deborah, Mary's aunt, the one who had always stayed quiet. "I knew the truth," she said softly. "I begged your father to let you stay. He refused, said it was about the church, but really, it was about control." Mary looked at her aunt. "You let him send me away?" Deborah nodded slowly. I thought he would come to his senses, but he didn't, and I never forgave myself for my silence. The tension in the crowd grew. Old truths were rising like smoke from a fire long buried. And it wasn't over. Back at the town bank, word had spread, and a man in a gray suit watched the scene through the window. His name was Caleb. He was the town's new investment officer. Smart, cold, calculating. He didn't like this, because if Mary was back, she might claim her grandmother's inheritance. An account left untouched for 20 years, worth hundreds of thousands. And Caleb had plans for that money. Mary didn't know yet, but her name was still on the papers. Her father had hidden the truth, and Caleb, he had helped cover it up for a price. He made one phone call. "She's back," he said. "We need to stop her before she finds the will." That night, Mary sat with Elijah on the porch of Miss Ruth's house. The air was heavy, not just with heat, but with truth. She looked at her son. "You sure you're okay?" she asked. He gave a small smile. "I was raised by a fighter. I'm more than okay." But inside, he wasn't. All his life, Elijah had dreamed of this town, of one day meeting the people who were part of his story. Now he knew the truth, and it hurt. "They talk like I'm a mistake," he said quietly, "like I shouldn't exist." Mary reached for his hand. "They're wrong. You're my miracle. The one thing that gave my life purpose when I had nothing." Across town, Caleb sat in his office late into the night. Stacks of papers, hidden ledgers, old wills. He wasn't worried. Yet. But he didn't like loose ends. He dialed a number. "Get me the safe deposit access log," he said, "and check who's been asking about the Landon estate." The next morning, Miss Ruth handed Mary a folder. "Your grandmother left this in the church office years ago," she said. "Your father kept it hidden, but I took a copy, just in case." Mary opened the folder. Inside was a copy of the will, her name, clear as day. She looked at Ruth, heart pounding. "She left it to me?" Ruth nodded. "She knew you'd come back someday, said you'd know what to do with it." Elijah leaned forward. "There's a clause. If you don't claim it by the end of this month, it goes to the church." Mary stood frozen. "Which means my father." Suddenly, everything made sense. The shame, the exile, the silence. It wasn't just about pride. It was about money. Elijah's eyes darkened. He knew all along, and he let you suffer to protect a bank account. Mary felt the weight of it hit her chest. The house, the sermons, the judgment. It was all hiding something darker. And now, they had only days before the inheritance transferred legally to the church, into her father's control. Mary clenched the folder in her hands. "I'm not just fighting for my past," she said. "I'm fighting for justice." But she wasn't the only one planning. At the church office, Caleb and Mary's father sat in silence. "You told me this would never come up," Caleb said. Her father looked tired, angry. "She was supposed to stay gone." Caleb leaned in. If this story goes public, we'll both lose everything. The bank, the land, the trust from the community. Her father stood. Then stop her. Do whatever it takes. That same afternoon, a letter arrived at the bakery. No name. Inside, a warning. Walk away, Mary, or you'll lose more than you already have. Miss Ruth paled as she read it. They're scared, she said. That means you're close. Mary looked at the letter. I'm not afraid of them anymore. Elijah stood behind her. Let's bring it all to light. The church was packed that Sunday. More people than usual. Not for the sermon, but for the whispers. They'd all heard. About Mary. About the will. About the truth finally coming to light. Her father stood at the pulpit, hands trembling slightly as he flipped through his Bible. But his words felt hollow. People weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking for her. Then, right as he opened his mouth to speak, the doors opened. Mary walked in, head held high. Elijah at her side, Miss Ruth just behind them, holding the folder. Gasps, whispers. Some stood, some sat frozen. Mary walked slowly to the front, not asking permission, just taking her place. Her father stared at her. You're not welcome here, he said. But Mary didn't stop. She turned to the crowd and spoke, her voice calm but unshakable. I didn't come here to argue. I came to reveal. She turned to Miss Ruth, who stepped forward and handed her the will. This is the original copy of my grandmother's inheritance. Signed, witnessed, sealed. She turned to the crowd again. My father kept it hidden because if I disappeared, he'd gain control of everything. The room erupted. People stood. Some yelled. Others cried. Elijah raised his hand, holding up the second letter. And this, he said, is from Joseph, the boy you blamed, the boy who was never given a voice. Mary took a deep breath. For years, I carried the weight of shame, but shame only grows where truth is buried. And today, that ends. Her father stepped down from the pulpit, face flushed with fury. You think you're better than me? He barked. After all you did? Mary looked at him, tears in her eyes. No, I don't think I'm better, but I'm no longer broken. Then she said the words that silenced the room. You used the name of God to justify your greed, but God is not in control. You are. And that's the part you never confessed. He staggered slightly. Mary turned to the crowd, voice trembling but full. You preached of sin, of shame, but you never preached about grace. You never told them that mercy was greater than pride. She held up her Bible, voice breaking. For there is nothing hidden that will not be disclosed, and nothing concealed that will not be brought to light. Luke 8:17. A woman in the front row began to sob. Others bowed their heads. Caleb, who had slipped into the back unnoticed, pulled out his phone and sent a single message. We lost. Mary stepped down from the altar and walked past her father. He didn't stop her, because deep down, he knew. He had lost more than the inheritance. He had lost her. And worse, he had lost the respect of the people who once believed in him. Outside, Elijah hugged her tightly. "You did it, Mom." She looked up at the church one last time. "No," she said. "God did." And just like that, the town would never be the same. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. The town buzzed with everything left unsaid. Some avoided Mary on the street. Others approached her with tears in their eyes, asking for forgiveness. A few just nodded respectfully. Silent apologies from hearts that had judged her too soon. At the bank, Caleb was gone, resigned overnight. Rumors said he'd moved far away. And Mary's father? He stopped preaching. The church doors remained closed the following Sunday. No message, no music, just silence. Elijah walked through the town alone that morning. People greeted him now, called him son. Some even invited him for coffee, but he didn't care about their kindness. Not yet. Funny how people love you once the truth makes them look bad, he told Mary. She placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't let bitterness grow where God wants to plant peace. He looked at her, eyes softening. You really believe he can make something good out of all this? She nodded slowly. I don't just believe it. I've lived it. Daniel, the man from the coffee shop, visited them later that week. He sat on the porch, nervous. I'm putting together a group, he said, for people who want to rebuild this town from the inside, for those who've been pushed aside, and for those who stayed quiet for too long. Mary raised an eyebrow. You think they'll listen? He smiled. They already are. Miss Ruth baked a pie that afternoon, her way of celebrating. She looked at Mary and said, I always knew you'd come back stronger, but I didn't expect you'd bring truth with you like a storm. Mary laughed softly. I didn't bring the storm. It was already here. I just opened the windows. Word eventually reached Mary that her father had been seen walking alone at night. No Bible, no crowd, just a man and his thoughts. He never apologized directly. But one morning, a letter was left at the bakery door. No signature, just 3 simple lines. I was wrong. I was afraid. You were right. Mary read it, folded it carefully, and placed it inside her Bible. Elijah saw her do it. You're keeping it? She nodded. Some letters are not for burning. They're for remembering who you were and how far you've come. The bakery reopened the next week. But now, it wasn't just for bread and pastries. Mary and Miss Ruth had turned the small space above into something more. A place where women could come, talk, heal, start again. They called it the Upper Room. Every Wednesday, the light stayed on late. Laughter, tears, prayer, women who had once judged Mary. now sat beside her, telling their own stories. Stories they'd buried for years. Elijah helped paint the walls. "I never thought I'd stay here," he said one evening. Mary looked at him, wiping her hands. "You're not staying in the same place," she said. "You're helping build a new one." Daniel came by often. He brought books, advice, quiet encouragement, and something else, a growing fondness for Mary. One evening as they locked up, he turned to her. "You ever think about starting over with someone?" She hesitated. "I spent most of my life running from the past. Now I'm just learning how to stand still." He smiled. "I'm not in a rush. Just here." Mary didn't answer, but she didn't walk away either. Meanwhile, word about the inheritance spread to other towns. People came asking for interviews, for her to speak. But Mary declined them all. "This isn't a show," she told one reporter. "It's a story. And stories don't belong on stages. They belong in hearts." With the funds from the inheritance, she repaired the old youth center, built a small reading room next to the church, open to anyone. No judgment. Elijah found himself mentoring younger kids, teaching them guitar, helping them with math. One boy asked him once, "You're the one they called a mistake, right?" Elijah paused, then smiled gently. "Yeah, but mistakes can turn into miracles if you give God enough time." Mary watched from the door. She didn't cry, but her heart did. A quiet, grateful ache. One evening as the sun dipped low, her father came walking up the path. He looked smaller, older, no longer the man who ruled from the pulpit, but a man who'd been humbled by truth. Mary stepped outside. They stood in silence. Then he spoke. "I came to see the center." She nodded. "It's open." He looked around. "You've done well." Mary met his eyes. "I didn't do it to prove anything." "I know." He hesitated. "I used to think love meant control, that faith meant fear, but you showed me something different." She tilted her head. "I didn't do it alone." He took a breath. "Would you allow me to help, even if it's just to sweep floors?" Mary smiled. "Redemption doesn't start in pulpits," she said. "It starts in small things, like sweeping." And that's how it began. Her father, once the face of her pain, now pushing a broom in the back hallway. Quiet. Learning. And Mary, she was healing. Not fast, but fully. Because some healing doesn't come in miracles. It comes in movement, and every day. She moved forward. Summer arrived quietly. The days stretched longer. Children played in the park again. The town softened, but not everyone was ready to forget. At the edge of town, a small group had started to whisper again. They didn't like what Mary represented, didn't like the changes, didn't like a woman with a past leading anything. "She's dangerous," one said, "putting ideas in people's heads." But Mary didn't stop. She worked harder. The reading room was now filled every afternoon. Women came not just from the town but nearby areas. Young mothers, widows, grandmothers, people who had lived in silence for too long. Elijah began organizing music nights. Children sang. Older folks read poems. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And hearts were changing. Daniel, meanwhile, had taken a job as a volunteer accountant for the community center. One day, while reviewing old bank records, he found something. A transaction. Small, but strange. It led to another, and another, until he saw it. A trail of money. Moved, hidden, disguised. He went straight to Mary. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "These transfers were made from the church account to a private one. Even after you returned." Mary looked at the papers and saw the name. Caleb. He had never truly left. He had simply gone underground. She stood slowly. "I thought it was over," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Caleb's using shell accounts, and he's not done. If this money disappears, so does everything you've built." That night, Mary didn't sleep. She sat in the window, looking at the stars, praying. "Lord, I thought the storm had passed, but maybe you're not done writing this story." Elijah came and sat beside her. "You okay?" She turned to him. "If Caleb wins, we lose the center, the will, everything." He frowned. "Then we don't let him." Daniel began gathering evidence. Old bank logs, archived emails, testimonies from former employees. But they had to move fast. Because Caleb was preparing one last move, a wire transfer that would drain the remaining funds by Friday. It was now Tuesday. 3 days, 3 chances to stop him. Mary looked at her son. "You ready for one last fight?" He nodded. "Let's finish what we started." Friday morning. The town was quiet. Too quiet. Mary stood outside the old bank building. Elijah beside her. Daniel behind them, holding a folder thick with evidence. Inside, Caleb sat at a desk in a back office, watching the clock. 10:57 a.m. 3 minutes left before the transfer. He smiled, but he didn't know they were already inside. Daniel had used his old credentials to enter early. Mary had walked through the front, calm. Elijah stayed by the door. At exactly 10:58, Mary opened the door to Caleb's office. He looked up, annoyed. "I told them no visitors today." Mary stepped inside, her voice quiet. "You've been stealing from the church." Caleb froze, only for a second. Then he chuckled. "You have no proof." Daniel walked in, dropping the folder on the desk. "We have every transaction, every forged signature, every dollar." Caleb stood. "This is slander. You don't understand how finance works." Mary stepped closer. "No, Caleb, you don't understand how truth works." She opened her Bible and laid it on his desk. "You tried to bury it, but the truth always rises." Caleb's face hardened. "Even if you're right, no one will believe you. Your past disqualifies you. Elijah entered now. I'm her past, and I believe her. Caleb moved toward the keyboard. One last try, but Daniel was faster. He reached across and shut off the screen. The transfer's blocked. We sent everything to the board this morning. You're finished. Caleb's mask cracked. I did what I had to do. She didn't deserve that money. She's just a pregnant girl who got lucky. Mary stepped forward. No, I was a girl who lost everything and still got up again. Her voice was steady, not because of luck, because of grace. Caleb was arrested later that afternoon. The news spread fast, and by evening the town gathered outside the community center. Mary stood in front of them. No microphone this time, just truth. You all saw me fall once, but now I want you to see something greater, that we can rise. She looked at the faces before her, people who once whispered behind her back, people who now stood in silent respect. I didn't come back for revenge, she said. I came back for restoration. The crowd was quiet. Then someone began to clap, then another, and soon the whole town was on its feet. Her father stood in the back, tears in his eyes, and this time he clapped too. Mary turned to Elijah. You think we did it? He smiled. No, Mom, I think God did. A few months later, the community center overflowed with life. Children ran through the halls. Elderly folks laughed over coffee, and the walls, once cracked with silence, now echoed with hope. Mary sat in her office, looking through letters from women across the country. Some wrote to thank her. Others asked for help. A few simply said, "Your story gave me strength." She kept every one. Elijah came in holding 2 mugs of tea. Still working? He asked. Mary smiled. Just reading. He sat across from her. You ever think this would be your life? She shook her head. No, but I thank God it is. Her father visited the center every Tuesday. Quiet, humble. He didn't preach anymore, but he listened. One day, he stood beside Mary in the garden. I never knew love could look like this, he said softly. She didn't answer right away. Then she whispered, Love was always here. You just had your eyes closed. Daniel, now fully part of the center's team, brought news one evening. They approved the expansion grant. We'll have enough to open 2 more branches. Mary looked at the blueprints, her heart full. It wasn't about money, or buildings, or proving anything. It was about healing, and offering that healing to others. Miss Ruth passed away peacefully that winter. They held her service in the church, packed with people. Tears and laughter mingled. Mary stood before the crowd and said, She believed in the broken. She fed the forgotten, and she never stopped loving me, even when I couldn't love myself. She placed Miss Ruth's old apron on the altar and whispered, Thank you. Elijah continued to grow, not just in years, but in wisdom. He told his story without shame now. Even spoke at conferences, Sometimes, after he shared, someone would ask, "How did you survive all that?" And he'd smile, soft and sure. My mom, and a God who never gave up on her. Mary never stopped praying, not for blessings, but for clarity. Clarity to always walk in truth, even when it hurt, even when it cost her everything. Because in the end, it gave her back more than she ever lost. Years later, a little girl ran through the garden outside the center, hair wild, laughter loud. "Grandma Mary!" she shouted. "Come see what I found." Mary, now with streaks of silver in her hair, smiled as she rose from the bench. She walked slowly, gracefully, toward the child. "What is it, sweetheart?" The girl held up a small flower. "It was growing between the rocks." Mary knelt beside her. "Sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the hardest places." Behind them, Elijah stood watching, older now, wiser, still her son, still her miracle. He walked toward them, a letter in hand. "They want to name the new center after you," he said. Mary looked at the flower again. "Only if they remember it was never about me," she said. "It was always about grace." And the wind carried her words, soft as a prayer, strong as her story. If this story moved your heart, if you believe in second chances, in truth, in grace, then don't let it stop here. Share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear that the past does not define the future, that healing is real, and that no shame is greater than the love of God. Leave a comment below telling us what part of Mary's story spoke to you the most. And remember, no matter how dark your beginning, God still writes beautiful endings.